Hey guys, LevelCap here. Today I want to do a bit of a blast from the past video. This is Medal of Honor Warfighter. It came out in late 2012. It was an EA game running on the Frostbite 2 engine, and this was sort of supposed to be EA's next big first-person shooter. And unfortunately it was a massive failure on many levels. But there are some really cool things about this game, some of which just made me want to revisit the gameplay and try it out again. It's been a while since I played it. I wanted to see if any of the patches improved the game and what the gunplay and weapon mechanics were like. One of the things that I do remember really liking about this game was the highly authentic weapon modeling and just weapon systems. A lot of the guns in this game are very authentic to what soldiers would be using in real life. In fact, a lot of the guns you'll see here are just variations of the M4, but they're set up in different ways that actually affect their performance pretty drastically. Now, it's fairly well documented that there was a lot of military consulting going on when designing this game, and it really shows in terms of the weapon selection and the authenticity in terms of how the guns look and how awesome the red dot sights look when you aim down sights. Very few games can replicate red dot sights the way that they look in real life, and I think that Medal of Honor Warfighter kind of does one of the best jobs that I've seen so far. All the guns in the game are things that you would expect to see in current day military service with special forces from all over the world. The weapon customization is also very extensive, but again, highly realistic. Rather than having a lot of individual attachment options, attachments come in packages allowing you to customize your weapon in simpler ways that allow you to make your gun just universally more accurate and better for long range engagements, or ways that make it a little bit faster to draw but not so accurate, so it's better for close quarters. Very simple tweaking to your gun, but in terms of the attachments and the visual aesthetics, you can make some fairly big changes. And camouflage customization wise, the guns in this game look so much better than any other game I've ever played. The camouflage looks amazing, and I really wish EA had perhaps borrowed some of these assets and brought them over to perhaps the Battlefield franchise. Unfortunately, this graphical fidelity didn't really translate over into the map design process, and a lot of the maps themselves didn't look very impressive. They also felt very stale on many fronts. We're using the Frostbite engine, so many players were expecting a lot of destruction and pretty much got nothing when it came to Warfighter. That being said, this is an older game, and I certainly don't want to harp on it for all the reasons it's already been harped on before. My intention of making this video is to actually look at some of the things that I think this game has done better than any other game has before, and hopefully maybe point them out so that developers, specifically EA, can take advantage of them for their future game developments, because Medal of Honor Warfighter, despite its problems, had a lot of really cool things going for it. For example, the buddy system allowed a very interesting interaction between yourself and one other player on the battlefield. Not only could you spawn on this buddy, but you could actually go up to the buddy and get health and ammo. Only now is Hardline allowing you to pick health and ammo off of your teammates, but this was something that was around back in 2012. It was pretty innovative for its time. Now, if your buddy was actively engaged in combat, the system would not allow you to spawn on them. This would pretty much minimize the times that you spawned into instant death situations, which is something that happens all the time in Battlefield 4. Well, Warfighter had clearly looked at this situation and decided that it needed a fix, and we see it working well here, yet we don't ever see this system in any other EA games or really implementing itself in, say, the Battlefield franchise. And it's really unfortunate because, again, there's a lot of cool innovations in this game that just never really saw the light of day in other titles because, again, this title was chalked up to a failure in general. So they said, oh, let's not take any of the cool ideas or innovations from Warfighter because that game didn't do well. Now, of course, the buddy system had a fatal flaw. You were very much dependent on one other player on the battlefield. If that player was no good, a crappy player, they never stayed alive, then you really weren't going to get many benefits from it. The other fatal flaw was that sometimes you wouldn't get partnered up with a buddy and you would lose out on some really big benefits. So obviously having the buddy system rely on just one other player was a little bit of a flaw. Battlefield balances that out with having a squad system, but it doesn't mean you couldn't implement some of these cool features and mechanics that come from the buddy system. The game also borrowed heavily from Battlefield, and they took essentially the game mode Rush and improved upon it. Rather than blowing up detonating MCOMs in the game mode Rush, they made made more dynamic objectives here where you would have to blow up an ammo cache or destroy a bridge or blow up a guard tower or some sort of objective that actually made sense as you progress through the level. And these objectives were cooler, you know, it's like, okay, we blew up the bridge, now we can move on to the next stage of the map, and that made a lot more sense. I mean, it's a simple improvement over the Battlefield version of Rush, but it was still a nice thing to see, and we've never seen those kind of ideas propagate themselves again in the Battlefield franchise. Now I want to get back to the gun customization in this game a bit, because I think they really do touch on something that I think Battlefield has been going down the wrong path for a while with, and Battlefield has been overcomplicating the way that you customize your weapon. There's all these different kinds of underbarrel attachments, different grips, vertical grips, W grip, foregrip, heavy barrels, different barrel attachments, suppressors, flash hiders, whatever, all these things that give you all these different kinds of abilities and change your weapon in certain ways, but it's not too clear on exactly what they do to your gun, and it can also be really confusing on how to run your weapon. I've seen a lot of people just running these horrible setups on certain guns, and they just don't know any better, so you could be putting yourself at a huge disadvantage by configuring your weapon in just a bad way. And I think it's kind of silly to make a customization system that's just so complicated that literally even now I'm still referring to charts in terms of how to configure my weapons in Battlefield to be the most effective. Now, Warfighter didn't take their system as far as they could have, but overall I like the idea that they're going with, whereas you kind of choose different packages for your weapon. You sort of pick aggressive packages or long range packages, and those packages come with a bunch of attachments that make sense on what you would put on that weapon for that kind of fighting. So you don't end up with a gun that looks really wonky or goofy. All your guns have very militaristic looking setups to them, yet they give you an overall stat increase in certain areas. Like, you want the long range gun, okay, it becomes more accurate, the damage increases at range. You want the close quarters gun, you have fast time to aim down sight, faster reloading speed. Not only are these changes represented visually in a logical way to the gun, but it's also a fairly straightforward system that I don't need to read charts and stuff to understand what I want to do to my gun to try and tweak it to be better. Now, although I won't say that the Medal of Honor Warfighter graphics were superior to any of the Battlefield games at the time, I will say that the particle effect system was actually really impressive. That, combining with the sound system, gave you a very, very realistic feeling pyrotechnics effect on a lot of things. The smoke was very realistic looking. It had a very cool effect when players would move through that smoke, and also when grenades would go off near you, not only would the flash from flashbangs and other grenades light up the environment around them in a very realistic way, something that I don't see in Battlefield quite so much, but also they would leave a bit of a ringing in your ears if they went off too close to you. Now, Battlefield does have this with certain explosives in the game or certain situations, but not on the level that Warfighter did, and it might be obnoxious if they implemented that in Battlefield just because of the amount of explosive spam, but I will say it just added a huge element to the realism that I experienced when playing Warfighter. Now, there's so many things that I actually really like about Warfighter. It becomes more painful because this game fails in so many ways. The UI is awful, I can't stand the gun mechanics, the level design isn't particularly great, the environmental graphics are pretty disappointing, the spawn system overall isn't good. You end up spawning in front of a lot of enemies all the time, even if you're not spawning on your buddy. Then there's the buddy system flaws. Your microphone is always on, which can be unbelievably annoying if you're playing with a buddy that is playing with speakers on and his mic is just blasting. You can mute them, but this just happens all the time, and I wish there was a way to turn it off. Then of course there is the massive amount of explosive spam. Your guns have extremely long time to kill. It's very hard to long range kill somebody with an assault rifle, yet any grenade is pretty much a one-shot kill, and so you're going to see grenades flying around the map constantly. Plus your kill streaks are air streaks and stuff like that, so there's a lot of stuff going on in this game that can be extremely aggravating. That being said, I feel like a lot of developers, specifically EA, are overlooking some of the really cool things that this game did to innovate the first-person shooter franchise, and I'm hoping we can perhaps bring some of those things back into the modern shooter. Anyway, that wraps it up for this Warfighter throwback video. Let me know in the comments if you actually played Medal of Honor Warfighter and what you thought of it. As always guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap, signing off.